Hey everyone, I'm Liz and welcome to the Milk and Honey YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through how to sew these super cute quilted tote bags. I kept getting these cottagecore style totes on my Pinterest, and I knew I had to make one for spring that's also beginner friendly. I decided to go with tie closures for the bag because they are super simple to put in and there are no zippers, which actually makes these tote bags reversible. I tested between non-padded and padded handles and decided that the padded handles give it a little bit more structure, makes it feel a little bit more luxurious in the hands. I also tested a couple different widths of handles and decided for the written pattern to increase the width of the handles. I have a few different sizes here to show you. This one here is the toddler or mini size. It is great if you want to make matching totes for you and a child or to gift them. This one's going to go to my niece once we're done filming, but just so you can see inside, there is still a good amount of space in here. And with the toddler and the small size, I wanted to show you what it would look like with using the exterior fabric for the ties, because for the two larger ones I used the lining fabric. So that's the toddler sized. This one here is the small size tote. And I'll have all of the measurements for the sizes listed in the description. This one here is the large tote. I have been using this one the most. This has been the one I've been testing for about 3 months now. So it's gotten a lot of love. So in this one, I can usually keep my laptop, chargers, water bottle, notebooks, jacket or sweater, and still have room for like my little pouch of essentials. I've actually been really surprised how much I've been going to pull this one out to use instead of my backpack or my other bags. And as you'll probably see, all of these bags, I decided to go with a wider base because I like to put things like water bottles inside of these totes. And I've seen a lot that are a little bit more narrow, which are great if you're looking for something like that, but these ones are nice and deep, which I love. So this is the large tote. And then this one at the very back here, this blue one, is the oversized one. I've been using this one if I'm staying somewhere overnight or if I'm bringing things somewhere for me and my husband. It's a really nice size. It is pretty large. And it's a little dirty because you see I've been using it. So these are the sizes. The only size I don't have here to show you right now is the medium-sized tote, and that's because we're going to be making that one today. So if you'd like to make one of your own, keep on watching. All the materials and cutting for the medium size will be in the description. If you prefer to follow along in a paper copy, I'll have the link to the PDF pattern that's available on my Etsy. The PDF will also include the additional sizes that I showed you. Let's dive in. So for this bag, you're going to need 2 cotton prints that are contrasting colors, and you're also going to need some sort of stabilizer. I'm going to use polyester batting, but you can use cotton batting or even fusible foam. From color 1, you're going to need 2 A pieces that measure 14 3/4 inches wide by 12 3/4 inches tall. And this is going to be the exterior of the bag. If you're using a directional fabric, just make sure the pattern is running vertical on the 12 3/4 inch side. You're also going to need 2 B pieces that measure 6 inches wide by 22 inches long. Here I just have a piece of width of fabric, which is 44 inches, so I'm just going to cut it on the fold here. This is going to be for the straps for the bag. For color 2, you're going to need 2 C pieces that measure 14 3/4 inches wide by 12 3/4 inches tall. And this is going to be for the lining of the bag. I decided to go with a solid for my lining because I don't plan to make mine reversible. But if you do want to make yours reversible, just make sure if you're using a directional fabric that again, it's running along the 12 3/4 inch edge. You will also need 2 D pieces that measure 12 inches long by 2 inches wide. These are going to be for the ties. If you don't want ties in your tote, then you can skip this piece. You could also cut this from color 1 if you prefer that look, or you can even use 2 pieces of 1/2 inch webbing that are 12 inches long. For batting, you're going to need 2 pieces that measure 17 inches wide by 15 inches. I'm using polyester batting, but again, you can use cotton or you can even use fusible foam if you want something with a little bit more stability. What you go with, it's really up to your personal preference. I like my tote bags to be quite fluffy and slouchy, so I like to use a higher loft polyester. And then finally, you're going to need 2 strips of batting that measure 1.5 inches wide by 22 inches wide. These are going to be for the handles. And if you want your handles to be extra padded, you can even double up on this number. So to make the fabric ties, you're going to take your D piece, and I've already gone ahead and pre-ironed mine just to show you. I'm using a solid, so there is no right and wrong side for me. But if you're using a pattern, you're going to want to fold it in half with the wrong sides touching each other on the long edge. And then you're going to iron it to create a crease in the center. Then you're going to unfold it and fold it again, but this time you're going to bring that raw edge to the center crease that you created, just like this. Then you're going to want to iron it again to create a crease, open it back up, and on one of the short edges, you're going to fold in about 1/4 inch and give it a press. So once all of our creases are made, we're just going to trim it just a little bit to help reduce the bulk. And to do that, we're just going to trim on the corner just like this. And again on the other side. And we want to make sure that this cut isn't going all the way to the center. It's just going to that first crease closest to the edge on both sides. So now that this is all prepared, we're going to fold it. So we're going to fold it in on the right side on that first crease. Then we're going to fold down on the short edge. We're going to fold in again. And finally, we're going to fold and tuck this last open edge inside of the tie, just like so. And you can just run your hand down the length of it, just to make sure everything is nice and aligned. And I'm just gonna grab my quilting clips and just use a few clips to secure this all in place. So once you've got it all clipped or pinned, you're going to take it to your machine, and I like to use an edge stitch just because this is quite a small piece to be working with. And I use a 1.8 stitch length. Sorry, I use a 2.5 stitch length for this piece. I like to start at the very bottom here where the open raw edge is. And what I do is I start here along the open side, I sew all the way down, I pivot, I sew across, and I sew all the way back down to the other open end. So I'm gonna go sew this. So after that piece is all sewn down, it should be looking something like this. And you're gonna go ahead and repeat these steps on the remaining D piece to create a total of 2 ties. Next, we're going to make the straps or the handles for the bag, and we're going to take our 6 by 22 inch piece, which is our C piece, and like before, I just pre-ironed it to show you. What you're going to do is you're going to start by folding in half with the wrong sides together and the long edges touching, and you're going to iron along that edge there. Then you're going to open it back up, And you're going to take the long edges and bring it in to meet that middle crease on both sides. And you're going to give that a good iron, and you can even fold it in once more and iron it again. Now you're going to take one of your 1.5 inch batting strips for the handles, and you're going to open up the fabric just like this, and you're going to lay the batting on the inside, one of the inside portions. I'm just gonna trim my piece a little right there. And you're going to fold it to encase that piece of batting, just like this. And then you're going to fold the fabric over it. And I'm going to use my quilting clips again just to keep it all in place. Now, if you want a lot of fluffiness in your handles, then you can go ahead and double up on the batting like I mentioned before. So now is when you would want to do that. So as you can see, we have our fabric pieces with the batting wedged in between one of the sides. Now you're going to take this to your machine, and you can either sew a single set of stitches or a double set. If your machine does decorative stitches, this is a great time to make use of them if you want to add a little something extra to your bag. Personally, I really like the look of a double stitched line, and let me just get my other bag to show you. This is what I mean by a double stitched line. I have 2 pieces of stitching going across either side. So I'm going to go ahead and sew down this handle, and I'm going to repeat these steps on my remaining C-piece and batting strip for the handles. Now that our handles and our ties are ready to go, we can prepare our fabric for quilting. Now you can get really creative with this step. There's a lot of different types of quilting patterns you can try. If you're a beginner, I suggest doing straight vertical lines or vertical and horizontal lines. This is really a great project if you want to practice your free motion quilting if your machine can do it. I'm going to sew vertical lines on mine, and how I like to do it is I take my exterior pieces, and I've already got them all set up to be quilted. So what you're going to do is take your exterior piece, and you're going to want to have the wrong side facing the batting, and I just like to fold mine in half so I can get my center line. And you can take this to an iron and get like a nice crease on it, but I just like to do a little finger press here so I know where my center is. And then when I open it up, it might be a little hard to see on camera, but I have a very faint line running right through the center of the fabric. So that's where I'm going to put my first set of stitches. Then I'm going to use the guide bar on my machine to make subsequent stitches on the right and the left side. Now when we're quilting, we like to start from the center and work our way out, and that's just to prevent the fabric from warping and shifting when you quilt, so it doesn't end up on an angle and you end up with no batting under your fabric. Now before I take this to the machine, I'm just going to throw a couple of pins in here to help prevent any shifting of my fabric. And I'll just do the same on my other piece. So now we can take these to our machine and get them all quilted. Now before we attach the handles to our exterior pieces, we're going to want to trim all of the excess batting from the quilting process. If you wanted to include a little tag on your bag like I did, now is the best time to do that. I put mine about 3 inches down on the center of the bag along the long edge, which is the top edge. Now we're going to take our ties. We're going to start with one of them, and we want to match the raw edges together. So we're going to place it down, and we're going to have that raw edge overhang the edge by about 1/4 of an inch. And the reason why we're going to do this is because we're gonna have extra fabric now on the inside seam when we sew the top together. It'll give us a little bit more strength on the inside of the bag. Now for the straps. This measurement is going to be a little bit different based on the size that you're making, so you want to follow along in the pattern for that. This is the medium tote, so you're going to want to measure 2 inches from the edge of the tie. And you'll want to line up, oh, here I have a pin. You want to make sure that if you pick a side that you want to be the one that's shown more. I like this side a little bit more, the way the stitching looks, so I'm going to place it right side down. And again, I'm measuring 2 inches from the edge of the tie. And like how we did the tie, we're going to want to lift the strap up about 1/4 of an inch so we have more structure, more stability with the bag when we sew it together. We're going to move our ruler over to this side. And we're going to take our strap and we're going to rotate it so that same edge that's facing down is facing down on this side too. Just like this. Remember to hang it over the edge a little bit and pin it in place, just like this. Now it is important to note that you don't want this strap to be twisted, flipped the opposite way, because then your handles are going to look weird. So now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the same process of attaching the tie and the handles to our other exterior piece. And then we're going to sew it down using a 1.8 stitch length. And we're going to sew about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, just like a scant 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. So once they're attached, they should be looking something like this. And remember, we don't want to trim any of this extra fabric that's sticking out. So now what we're going to do, you can just lift these pieces up for now so they don't get caught for our next step. We're going to flip the pieces so that the right sides are facing each other, just like this. And we're going to align all of the raw edges. And you can secure it with either quilting clips or pins. And we're going to sew around the entire perimeter, making sure to leave the top open. Just like so. So for this, you're going to want to use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm probably going to use a 1.8 or a 2 stitch length. So we're going to want to start up here, sew all the way down, pivot, go across the bottom, and then back to the top, making sure to leave this top edge where the handles are unsewn. So next we're going to move on to boxing the corners for the exterior. And for this size, we're going to do 2 1/4 inches on either side. So to do that, you want to measure from the seam that you created and not from the edge of the fabric. So I'm doing 2 1/4. Oops, 2 1/4 is there and there, just like this. On this side and on this side, 2 1/4. Perfect. And what I like to do is make a diagonal line like this and this. And then I flip it over and I make the same markings on the other side. And you'll see in a minute why I like to do that. I like my box corners to be very precise. And this is just one way I can help myself do that. Again. Perfect. So we are going to put our hand inside the bag and just open up the seams open up the fabric here, and we're going to create a triangle. And now you can kind of see what those guidelines are doing for us. The ones that we created on the diagonal should be on the edge of the fabric. So we're going to want to fold the seam allowance for the bag and for the bottom of the bag and the side in opposite directions. And I'm going to use a couple pins to keep this in place, here and here. And we'll do the same on the other side. Just pull the fabric away from each other. I just like to put my hand in there to make sure everything is nice and flat on the inside. And make sure that whatever way you pointed this bottom seam on this side, you're pointing it the same way on the other side. And I'll put a pin here and here. Great. So we'll take this to our machine and we're gonna sew across this blue line on both sides of the bag to create our boxed corners. So now we're going to trim the extra bits of fabric here. And you can either do this with scissors or a rotary cutter. And I'm just gonna I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch away from the seam that I just made on both sides, just like this. And you can get rid of these 2 little pieces here. So we're gonna put this aside for a minute and we're gonna work on the lining now. So we're gonna take our 2 D pieces, and I'm using a solid so I have no right and wrong sides. But if you're using a print, you're gonna wanna place it so that the right sides are facing each other. And you're gonna wanna make sure all of the edges are lined up. And we're gonna just grab a marking pen. And what we're gonna do is on one of the long edges, we're going to mark about 4 inches in on one side and 4 inches in-ish on the other side. And this is going to be the area where we do not sew, because we're gonna use this area to turn the bag inside out. So what we're going to do is bring this to the machine. We're gonna start in the top corner, sew all the way down, pivot. Once we get to this marking, we're gonna backstitch, and we're going to jump over here, do a little backstitch, and then again continue until we reach the end here. So the top should be completely unsewn, as well as this little section at the bottom. Now, like before, we're going to take our ruler and marking pen and we're gonna mark out 2 1/4 inches on either side, making sure that we're measuring from our seam and not from the edge of the fabric. And these diagonal lines, they are optional, but I find that they help so much. So if you want to give it a try, this is a great time to try it out. And this is a washable pen, so when I run this through the washing machine, all of these markings will be gone. 2 1/4. Perfect. So like we did with the exterior, we're going to open this up to create our little triangles, remembering to fold our seams in opposite directions. And just gonna place a pin on both sides. The most important part is remembering to leave this opening at the bottom, because I have made a few of these and forgotten that part. And then it is a pain afterwards to have to go back and redo it. All right, so I have both of these pins, and again, making sure that this seam allowance here is pointed in the same direction on both sides. So I'm gonna bring this to my machine and stitch this down. So now I'm ready to trim my extra bits of fabric. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, leaving about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. All right. So what we're gonna do is take our exterior and we're going to flip it so the right side is facing out. And we can poke all our corners out if we want. And we're going to place this inside of the lining like this. Now, starting with the side seams, you're going to want to match those up. And I like to put my seams in facing opposite directions like this. This one's facing right and that one's facing left. Take a clip, pop it in, just like that. All right, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Line up the edge of the fabric and the seams. Perfect. And I like to pull the fabric taut, and I start with the center. And feel free to use lots of clips and pins. And then I just go all the way around, making sure everything is clipped in and all aligned. And I start in the center. And we'll do just a couple more. Here and over here. Perfect. So we're going to take this to our machine and we're going to sew around the entire top using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When we go over these spots here where the handles and the ties are, feel free to just go back and forth a couple times just to make sure they're really secure in place. So now that it is all sewn together, we can turn it inside out. So to do that, we're going to use that opening that we made in our lining before. And you can either just start pulling the exterior through or folding the lining over. Just make sure you're not pulling anything too tight because we don't want anything to rip. Great, so now it should look something like this. And I just like to go in and poke out all of my corners and the ones in my lining. Just like this. Now you can either sew your lining closed by hand or by machine. Because I'm not making my tote reversible, I'm just gonna sew right across using my machine. But if you're planning to make it reversible, it might be a good idea to hand stitch it. That way it's invisible. So I'm gonna go stitch mine closed. So I have my opening all sealed shut. So I'm gonna put it inside my bag. And I'm going to just roll this seam between my fingers just to make sure all of that fabric is up and not hiding. And I'm going to take it to my iron and I'm going to give it a really good press just to make it nice and crisp. And then I'm going to bring it to my machine and I'm going to sew around the entire perimeter, making sure that all of my ties and handles are facing outward. And I'm going to sew about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge around the entire top of my bag. All right, and after that top seam is sewn, we are left with this very cute tote bag that has this beautiful and simple tie closure. And it is ready to go on your next adventure with you. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, if you have any questions regarding today's pattern or ideas for a future pattern, please make sure to leave it in the comments below. If you're looking for sewing inspiration, make sure to subscribe to my channel for lots of fun sewing projects. Thanks so much for watching!